I'm Eric Chemi, and this is Politely Pushy. Mye Hoang is my guest today, and I'm really excited for this because you are the producer, the documentarian, or the executive producer, whatever we call the right word. You'll correct me. A movie called Cat Daddies, which is out right now. When I first saw the title, I was concerned. Is this like some sort of adult, like Cat Daddies? It made me concerned. Then I looked into it. Oh, it's for guys that own cats. And I had a cat for a while, only lasted a year. We'll get into that later. So I was like, okay, I get this. This is fun. I appreciate this. So my welcome to the show. I know you've got some cats right now walking around in the background there, but I
Yeah,
guess
it's
that's
funny.
perfect for today.
I get that a lot about the title. Like, is this something kinky? But I'm like, no, no, no. But I just feel like we need to take the name back. We need to take Cat Daddies back. Give it back to the cat community.
How did you come up with this idea?
um, I'm weirdly obsessed with men and their cats, images and things on social media. It's kind of turned into a bit of a movement. More men are proud to be cat lovers, and they just some men unabashedly love their cats and they love to share photos and videos of that. And I'm just one of those people that just is just addicted to it, and it really, really makes me happy. And at the same time, I had my own experience with my husband, who, when we were dating, he was not a cat guy at all. And then one day a cat found him, just kept coming back for food, and he was hooked. It only took a week. It was no influence of mine, and it was just astonishing for us to both discover something new about him. You think you know yourself, and life is full of surprises. And I think men have been conditioned for so long to not love cats or not consider them as a pet, that I think a lot of men don't know that they could have this within them, and that there are benefits, I think, for men to owning a cat.
What is it about the man and cat combo? Because I think we agree there's the stereotype that like women will have a cat, right? Like that's much more likely to be that. But the stereotype, the man with the cat, it, it's not like the manly man with the dog, right? It's like we go hunting and fishing and we have the dog. So what is it about the cat that it's just because they're smaller? Is it because their attitude? The cat has a little bit of a different attitude than the dog. What is it that the stereotype has worked against? In the past, a man being proud of owning a cat, but like you're saying that's starting to shift now.
Yeah, I think dogs, sorry, have always been seen as the protector, more of like, security, and just somehow more masculine. Whereas cats they do have more feminine movement, and they are difficult. They're a little more challenging, I'd have to say, to bond with. You do have to earn their trust. You do have to be more patient, more gentle. It requires a certain amount of tenderness, which is, I think, is great qualities for men to have, and is what appeals to me. And so I think that's a lot of it. And I also think we don't really see what it's really like to own a cat. Um, we don't see them on the street and dog parks, things like that. So if you don't own one, all you see is what you see in movies and TV, which is a pretty inaccurate depiction of them, because a lot of times they are harder to train, and harder to work with in movies and television. I mean, I can tell you firsthand that it's not easy to direct cats. They don't want to be directed. And so I think that's a lot of it. There's misconceptions about cats in general, and it takes a movie like this one to really see them in their most natural, sort of intimate state of being, and the relationships that you see with the men and their kitties. Yeah, I think it's something. I hope my documentary is special in that way, because it is difficult to capture, and so I think a lot of people don't know what
What
it's like.
Why did you decide I need to make a movie about this? And how many years ago was the idea of making a movie from idea? And then how long did it take to go from idea to actually putting it all together?
So I'm a cat lover, and I'm a cinephile. I'm a filmmaker, and I've always been dabbling in the narrative filmmaking world for probably like 20 years. But mostly devoted to survival jobs and things that I need to do to get by. And I just, as a cinephile and a cat lover, I wanted to see a movie like this. So it's really purely selfish motivation. I want to see. I love cat content. I love cat videos as much as anyone else, but I love being in the theater space and seeing cat cinema, and I love seeing it with other people in an audience. There's just nothing quite like it.
Had
So
you
we
done a movie
started, and
before? Sorry to jump. Had you
yeah,
done a
I've
movie
done some
before?
films before, and
Okay.
I also what I produced a lot. So my husband's also a filmmaker, and we
Okay.
work together a lot. So a lot of times he's directing, I'm producing. And in 2018, this was an idea of mine. It was purely an idea. And the more I talked about it with other people, especially other men, some of them don't even own a cat at all, they really sparked to it. And I think that whenever you have a creative idea and you find that a lot of people are sparking to it, there may be something there. And so I did get some help from my husband and some another partner that we have to kind of put up the seed money to get started. So we started shooting in 2019, and then we used that footage to kind of make like a sizzle reel to show and raise money. So we used that to raise more money, and we were crowdfunding. And then we were scheduled to finish April 2020 was when we were supposed to finish filming, and then we all know what happened there. And
You were
then
so close.
I know we
You
were
were so close.
so close, and then became so far because a lot of actual some of the men that were supposed to be in the film actually dropped out, or we couldn't travel to them, so we had to take them out of the mix. And a lot of little things like that can change everything in the course of a film, because I kind of like had it pre-written in my mind what it was going to be like, and then it totally changed. The movie actually changed tonally, and there were times during that year that I wondered if I could even pull this off. Like, all the ingredients, right, are different now. And so, because we were dealing with pandemic and some of those issues of mental health, and even the wildfires and everything that was going on that year, kind of just, it couldn't be ignored. It was coming out in the interviews more and more, and so it really shifted everything. Just the whole mood of that year just shifted the movie. And but I still had to make something. I still had to finish because I was beholden to so many people who donated their time and money. So we had to finish. So I'm just thrilled that it's connecting with people
You're
because
just
we
happy it's
almost couldn't
over.
have a movie.
You're like, thank God this is done.
Yeah.
Just so briefly to summarize, what was the tone originally? If you had to summarize it in a phrase, and then what was the tone in the end result?
I would say like it was a more light and quirky, more vignettes that don't really go together, except that they're all, I just wanted to make people laugh, right? And make
Right.
people
Like that was the intent. The original intent
have
was
a
a
good time.
light,
Yeah.
fun movie. Yeah.
Yeah. And all of that is still there. Like, if you see this in the theater, there's tons of laughter, there's all of that. But then it becomes extremely heartwarming and inspiring, and there's some stories that come out of there, that just, I guess, like, a lot of people are saying it's quite poignant for a cat movie. Like, I think it's taken us all by surprise, and it wasn't by design originally, but it's sort of like any good documentary, like, it'll rewrite itself. The story rewrites itself, right? And you just don't have control. And that's kind of what happened. It kind of like became, it just came into its own.
How much else changed because of COVID, right? So you've had some people drop out, the tone has changed, the travel is more difficult, probably recording is more difficult. What else about COVID changed your original plans?
I'd say two things. One is that, like, during 2020, like, I was in touch with all the cat dads to a point, and at some point a few of them just went off the grid, like totally MIA, and I couldn't get a response from them. that's all changed now 2 years later. Like, we're all in contact, they've all seen the film. But there was a period of time where I was just like really, also really worried about them. And some of them, like, I needed them to sign a form. I mean,
But
I
I
did
need you to
have the
sign a
release
form,
form,
but are you
but
dead? Right? Like I'm worried like you
yeah,
might be
I
dead, but like I
worry
need this
about
form. Yeah.
what's going on. And then it just turned out to be like they just decided not to do social media, and like and like they just had like a lot of personal busyness and things going on, and work stuff and work stress and things like that, which totally understandable. I mean, we all had that. And
Like
then
just
the
write
second
back to my
thing,
email. It's like, can you just respond to my email?
yeah, exactly. I mean, it's funny because like you have that I'd had that in this film, but I also had it personally too, where friends just sort of disappeared, right? and and you don't know what's happened to them. So there's so that's kind of some weirdness of that year. And then the other thing was like it was partially hard to finish. I think for anyone creative, artistic, during that year, it was a difficult year because you question what you're doing and whether what you're doing has any value, because we're in a pandemic and it doesn't feel like we're contributing.
Right, a lot of
you
soul
know
searching, right? Is this important to society? Is this how I want
Yes,
to
and
spend my life with this job? And it doesn't matter what your job is, right? It could be
yeah,
any job from the lowest job up to a CEO, right? Like, is this how I want to spend my time 24/7?
yeah, and as creatives especially, it was just like a really depressing time. And of all things that I'm doing, I'm making this cat documentary. Like, what, how is this going to help society? At the time, feeling pretty lost, and then not even knowing if I could finish. But now that that's over, and now that it's out, and now that people are connecting to it and seeing it multiple times and writing to me or coming up to me, yeah, I see it's totally worth it. I see the difference it makes, and the inspiration that it's created just from people learning the stories about these men.
I want to get into the response part in a second, but just real quickly, how did you recruit these people? Because you mentioned the recruiting and some dropped out. You had to find more. Was there a casting call? Did you reach out to people? Was
No,
it friends of friends? How did you get these
no,
people? How'd they find you?
just Instagram stalking.
Okay. So
Didn't I
if people were posting on
Yeah.
social media with them and their cat, then you thought, okay, if they're willing to post, they're probably willing to be in a movie too.
So some of them I was already following.
Okay.
Some of them have a really robust social media following. So I was already familiar, and I thought, well, it'd be so cool to have this guy and that guy, or this cat and that cat in a movie on the big screen. And then if I had some holes, like geographically, because I wanted to mix it up, I searched some hashtags like cat dads, men with cats, and it just takes you down like this long rabbit hole of this endless possibilities all over the world. But from there, I could sort of like, kind of pre-cast people from like what I see in their Instagram. I can kind of see where they live, what kind of environment. All the cats had to be different. All the guys had to look and sound different. They had to have a pretty well socialized cat. So if they're already doing all that on Instagram and showing their cat, then chances are pretty good that they're going to be open to share more, and that their cat is going to be okay with a strange crew coming in. So that was helpful. But there was one man, there's a homeless man who was living on the streets of New York with his cat, and he was completely a tip. There were a lot of cat ladies that were trying to help him for years get off the street. And one of the women just somehow found out about my project on the internet and said, like, I've got the guy for you. Please meet my friend. Put him in your movie. Maybe this will help. You're not going to meet a guy more devoted to his cat. And she was right. I met him, and I just instantly melted because, he told me that the only reason he continues to keep going is for his cat. It's the only thing he has, and that really got me. And so I said, I don't know if this is gonna work because tonally this already doesn't work for my movie, but we gotta do something, and we gotta meet this guy and this amazing cat who, yeah, is just so so amazing on screen. Like yeah, there's just so much dignity in this little cat who's so loyal and devoted to him, and we had to capture that. So
That
that's kind of how that all worked out.
that's certainly a touching story. So just some random business questions because I come from a business background. I'm always curious how this works. Do
Mhm.
you have to pay the people to be part of the movie, or is it just they volunteer? How does that work?
No. So in the documentary field, it's actually frowned upon to pay your subjects, although some people do it. I think they pay them sometimes an honorarium or something. But it's kind of frowned upon, right? Because you're making a documentary. You just want to capture everyone as accurately and naturally as possible. And you don't really want money to get in between that, if that makes sense.
Right, because it's more of a news story. You wouldn't pay a news guest, but as like an
Exactly.
actor, you would pay because it's all fake, right? It's meant to be entertainment. So this is closer to journalism in that sense. Um, the budgeting, the business model, like you mentioned, crowdfunding. How do you budget for something like this, and how do you make sure you stick to that budget with costs that can be unexpected?
Yeah, so luckily I have a lot of experience making micro budget films, so this definitely wasn't my first rodeo, but it was my first documentary. I knew kind of like I could reverse engineer it a little bit. Like I kind of know from past experience, okay, this movie, is going to probably make this much based on this and that. So let me make sure my budget does not go over that, if that makes sense. And so it's a lot of me working for free for a number of years. It's a lot of asking for favors, just pulling strings, because filmmaking is probably one of the most expensive things you could do out there. But luckily I just had enough experience and a good team and really just passionate people who weren't no you know no one was in it doing this for money. We are just doing it because we love cats, and because there's a lot of good that we could do with this movie. Not only help the man who was living on the streets, but also help shine a light on a lot of cat rescues, some of which are depicted in the film. So I think it's just like purely passion, really. It's really funded by that more than money, I'd say. Because like the hard cost of this is very, very low. But if you take into account all the favors, right, and all
Right.
the free work and time and labor that goes into it, then the cost is huge.
Right, if you had to pay everybody
You
their
had to pay
real
everybody
rates
their real
for a
rate.
real movie, yeah, like in a typical big budget, no expenses spared kind of thing, it would add up.
Yes. And I don't know if you want to go into the theatrical component that I'm doing, but I'm self-releasing theatrically, which is
That was gonna be my next
yeah.
question, so let's talk about the distribution here, because 'cause we're in a very weird world about
Mhm.
theatrical streaming, owning content, going with the distributor. Let's talk about all that.
Yeah, so I luckily I've done this before again in the
And thank God you
past
have, right? Like, I think a
with
lot
my
of people
husband.
think
Yeah.
they're gonna just show up and do a documentary that have never done a movie before, and they probably just get blown out of water, or at least you
Yeah.
knew exactly what you were doing. My guess is a lot of people think, "Oh, I can do this," or they wanna do it as a vanity project, and they never succeed.
Yeah, and I've actually done self theatrical before. I've done like that hybrid distribution before with my husband's films, and so we kind of knew what to expect a little bit. Now, we are spending more money on the theatrical, getting this out in a few theaters, probably than making the movie. But the secret weapon is that I was able to get a sponsor to pay for most of this. So a lot of the advertising, my 6 foot standee that's sitting in the theater, shipping, like a lot of these expenses, the cost of getting your movie out into theaters was a cat brand sponsor. And I met this sponsor along the way on my film festival journey, and this person just happened to be in the audience at a really great film festival, and the turnout was great, and they had an amazing time, and they contacted me later, and we just kind of started building this relationship of working together. And when I went to that sponsor for this idea of getting it out in theaters, they were fully on board, and it's worked out great. It's
Who's
a
the
lot.
sponsor? We got to get him a plug.
Oh, it's Meowtel, which is in the Bay Area. It's a cat sitting app.
Okay. Okay.
And
So you got to get the sponsor. Then
I
you can
mean,
put it in theaters. If you didn't have the sponsor, would you still have done a theatrical release?
probably because having this in the theater was so, so important to me. I probably would have done it anyway, but I don't know if it would have been as successful as it has been. We ended up being the third in the country for box office theater per screen or
Wow.
theater. Yeah, the box
Like
office for the per theater average.
right. That
So
means
if you
they're filling up seats, right? Like these are crowded shows, right? If you're getting a high per
right.
theater average. Yeah.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
we're only on one right now, we're only on one theater in the country, and that one theater, if you average out the grosses with the number of theaters movies are in, like
Right.
we're number 3, and that was a huge splash, especially during the pandemic. I think we surprised like a lot of people, for something that they consider as being such a niche, subject matter and documentary, because it's not like documentaries are pulling in a lot of money at the box office. So,
Right. This doesn't have the profile of a, big revenue type of blockbuster, right? It's not what we're
yeah.
typically seeing at the top. So how does it work just for our normal people in the audience? The producer has to pay the theater to run the movie, but I thought the theater, if anything, I thought the theater pays you to have the movie because then they'll sell the tickets and make money that way. So who's paying who to get this movie in the theater?
So, it can be a mix of things. I can't speak for everyone, but in my situation, because I'm coming in during a really crowded award season, I did have to four wall my theater in New York, which means I book it for a week and I pay a flat amount, which is a lot in New York. It's the most expensive place to open a movie. Um, and then you just hope that you do fine or you don't. Or I think a lot of people know that I'm not going to make any money, but I really need the prestige of opening in New York
Right.
City.
Right.
Luckily I'm on the positive side of that, but yeah, it's a gamble. But and then there's some cases that if they did have room, I think they would have taken the film and split the box office with me. But then all the other cities I'm opening with, I'm not four walling, and we're just splitting the box office together.
So there's a supply and demand of, their availability of space, how many
Yeah,
movies are
right.
out there, what the marketplace is that particular season.
Yeah, timing's pretty important for this
What's the
industry.
what's the streaming strategy for you? Do you want to get through the theaters first, then you put it online or a certain platform? How are you looking at that?
So I do have a distributor, a boutique distributor that is going to be doing all the VOD, all the Blu-ray, the all the online sales, all that. And they are expecting to roll it out early next year, although it's negotiable and it kind of depends on how this theatrical rollout ends up being. But they're really thrilled with the first weekend results, and they're actually asking to see if I'm willing to start pre-sales on VOD now, um, and getting the word out early, because normally you would only do that maybe a few weeks or a month in advance, and they're wanting to do it 2 or 3 months in advance so that people can go ahead and order now, even though the movie may not be out for several months.
What has surprised you about the response from viewers? Just something you weren't expecting in terms of how, they would react, how they would be inspired by the movie.
Yeah, people who are passionate about this film are really, really passionate, and they're always sending me messages and pictures. And someone sent a picture of just some random, like, chalkboard sign on the street of New York, like that belonged to like some kind of wine bar, and it had like little bits of news, like in chalk on this chalkboard. And one of the things they had written out was Cat Daddies new documentary now playing about men, and it just like wrote out what it's about. And like this is a wine bar that has like nothing to do with cats. It's just really bizarre. So I was just like, wow, this movie is really getting into the zeitgeist, to see things like that.
That's amazing. So what's next now that you're almost at the finish line here in terms of your effort, your work, getting it through the theaters, getting it out there? Do you do cat mommies? You do cat daddies too? The
I
sequel?
I've been
What's
asked
next?
I've been asked for all those things, and Cat Daddies 2 could be a thing. I wouldn't mind, and sounds like all the guys are on board to do that. But I was at a film festival recently, and it took place, one of the venues was inside an IMAX dome theater, and I noticed that normally when the film festival is not going on, they're showing a dog movie on IMAX. It's like some documentary about rescue dogs in Canada. And I thought, maybe this should be next. Maybe the cat lover should have a cat movie in IMAX.
That's great. My
Maybe
this
that's the next frontier.
Well, we'll have to see. We're gonna have to stay tuned, see what you come up with next. My This has been fascinating. What a great idea. I'm glad that you did it, right? You said this is the movie I want to see. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make the movie that I want to see.
And this is the way I want to see it. I want to see it in the theater, and that's how I want everyone else to see it.
This is
So
amazing. So thank you so much for the time today. I'm blown away. I'm so glad we had this conversation. Thank you so much, Mai.
thanks, Eric.
Thank you to my guest and thanks for listening. Subscribe to get the latest episodes each week and we'll see you next time.